What I aim to do in this talk is provide an overview of Freemasonry and its principles, and to really outline what it is and what it is not. I'll also outline the basic organisation and functioning of our lodges in particular, and a little bit beyond that, just so you get some context of how Freemasonry sits. And to explain something about what you might see if you were to walk into a Masonic lodge room. Now, we're very used in Freemasonry to doing talks for people on our premises, in our lodge rooms. And so I want to give you a little bit of a flavour of what that might be. So let's start with an introduction to Freemasonry itself. And I guess the thing that we all want to do is explain what is Freemasonry. Well, it's one of the world's oldest and largest social and charitable organisations. It offers a very particular or unique way of developing people. And it involves a series of dramas, each of which teaches philosophical lessons. They're meaningful. The roots of Freemasonry itself and its dramas lie within the medieval or operative stonemasons, and they're the people who built our cathedrals and castles. Now, those guys developed their own methods to train people in their profession, and they were very careful only to employ those who were properly qualified. In those days, people didn't tend to be literate, and to get work, they had to travel the country. So they needed means of proving their qualifications. And in essence, the stonemasons in those days were a sort of early form of quality assurance system, qualification scheme, and a professional body, all rolled into one. But they were concerned with moral and social education as well as occupational training. So they used stories to convey their teaching or their meaning. And those stories or dramas or ceremonies and the symbols and tools that they contain were based on stories from the building of King Solomon's Temple. And the significance of that is it was the first major building project to be described in any real detail. Now, that was back then. What we now have is what we call speculative Freemasonry, and it dates from the early 18th century, from over 300 years ago. And it emerged during the period of the Enlightenment, and it reflects Enlightenment principles of mutual respect, tolerance, education, and self-improvement. Now, our members no longer build castles and cathedrals, or at least very few of us do, I certainly don't. But instead, what we've done is adopted and adapted the stonemasons' dramas to refer to building our lives and actions to become better people. So the dramas that I'm referring to form progressive steps or degrees that new members take. And each step conveys different social and moral principles. The ultimate intention is to help us to become the best version of ourselves. And that's for our own benefit, for our relationships with others, and so that we can make a positive contribution to our communities and to society as a whole. Now, at the heart of what we do are four key values or principles. And the first of those is integrity. And that's about building good people. As Freemasons, we want to build ourselves to be people of integrity. Our membership provides a structure to help us achieve that goal. Secondly, friendship. And this is about building good relationships with others. Freemasonry provides a common foundation for friendship between members, and many of which last for life. Thirdly, respect. And this is, of course, is about building unity between people. It brings people together. Freemasonry, in fact, brings people together irrespective of race, religion, or any other perceived differences that tend to divide us as a society. And our last key principle is charity. Now, this builds compassion. Kindness and charitable giving are deeply ingrained within the principles of Freemasonry, and our organisation provides a structure for us to make positive contributions to our communities and various causes. Now, I mentioned that Freemasonry brings together people irrespective of our differences, but to be clear, it is open to people of all backgrounds. It's for people regardless of their race, upbringing, socioeconomic status, disability, sexuality, or religion. And if you meet our qualifications for membership, you can join. And you join by asking to join. You don't wait to be asked. Now, the qualifications I'm referring to include a minimum age, and looking at the screen, I suspect that you all meet that, a belief in a supreme being, and that you live and have lived your life in obedience to the law. Freemasonry also requires members not, and I repeat, not to use our membership for material or personal gain. Contrary to what I sometimes see on social media, I can assure you Freemasonry does not bestow earthly riches or power on its members. And the original stonemasons would all have been men. So from Freemasonry's earliest times, lodges were restricted to men. Starting just over 300 years ago, these lodges formed together into grand lodges, larger organisations. And they also inevitably at the time were for men only too. However, later mixed lodges were formed. And most of those ended up actually becoming women's only lodges, and then they formed their own women's only grand lodge. So today we have men only lodges, women only lodges, and mixed lodges, each of them with their own organisation or grand lodge. So in this country, at least, every person wishing to become a Freemason has complete choice whether they wish to be part of a single sex or mixed Freemasonry. Now, the lodges I belong to and the lodges which are responsible for organising this today are for men only and are part of the oldest Masonic authority in the world. That's the United Grand Lodge of England, known as UGLE. We work closely with the Order of Women Freemasons and Freemasonry for Women to promote Freemasonry as a whole. And I'm very pleased to see that Tina Akande, who's a member of the Honourable Fraternity of Ancient Freemasons, or Freemasonry for Women, is on the call tonight. Now, let me just expand further on what I meant by irrespective of our differences. What unites us as Freemasons are our shared belief in a supreme being, our principles, and our wish to be better people. Freemasonry is not concerned with and is no substitute for your religion. It has no theology or religious doctrine of its own, and it does not align itself with any other religion. In fact, Freemasonry counts among its members people of all of the world's faiths. All we in Freemasonry need to know is that an applicant for membership recognises that as human beings, we are not supreme, that there is a higher being, by whatever name he wishes to call that higher being. In other words, that higher being is the source of morality and not us. Now, nor is Freemasonry concerned with its members' political views. It's just sufficient to know that an applicant ceases to be a good citizen. So to prevent diverse religious and political views from dividing us, we insist that neither politics or religion are discussed when we meet as Freemasons or when we're acting in our Masonic capacities. Therefore, our lodges are places where people of many different religions and political views can meet together in harmony, based upon what we have in common, despite those things that divide us. Now, I also mentioned charity. Charitable giving of time and money is one of Freemasonry's great principles. And as Freemasons, we raise money by different means and at meetings and events. We have a central Masonic charity, which is known as the Masonic Charitable Foundation. That's its logo on the screen right now. And that charity, of which I'm a trustee incidentally, supports distressed Freemasons, their families, and non-Masonic causes. Collectively, Freemasons in England and Wales donate around £40 million every year to non-Masonic good causes. We rank probably about 13 or 14 in the list of grant-making charities in terms of the amount of money that we give every year. Obviously after things like BBC Children in Need and Comic Relief and so forth. So I hope this has given you a broad definition of what Freemasonry is and is not. I won't take questions yet, but if you've got questions about what I've said, please write them in the chat area, and then we'll address them when I finish the next, finish the talk itself. So let me go on and just talk a little bit about how Freemasonry is organised, because it will just help you get some of the language. First thing to know is that Freemasonry takes place in a lodge. Now, a lodge is not a physical building or meeting room. It's the particular group of Freemasons who've joined together to create a Masonic unit. A lodge meets at regular intervals, it carries out the dramas I've referred to, and it conducts the sort of business you'd expect of any local group, such as electing its officers for the next year and managing its own accounts. Each lodge meeting is usually in two parts. We have the formal meeting, which includes our dramas, and then we have the social gathering and meal that normally follows. To become a Freemason, you have to ask two existing members of the same lodge to propose you. You join at lodge level, and you then make an application to join their lodge. Its existing members have to accept you. They're not under any obligation to do so. The process can take a little while, as the lodge members will want to be confident that you are a fit and proper person, that you meet our membership qualifications, but also that you're somebody who will gel with their particular lodge. Once they do accept you as a member, you'll be introduced through the first of the series of dramas, which is a ceremony called initiation. And following this, you'll be a Freemason for life. Even if you resign from that lodge, you will still have the status of being a Freemason. Over time, you'll go through two more ceremonies to become what is known as a Master Mason. And if you wish to go further and find out more about Freemasonry, you can progress each year through a series of offices to eventually become the presiding officer or master of your lodge. Now, in the photograph, it's actually me sat in the big chair there. This is one of my lodges. It's a lodge that is especially for people with a connection with Scouting, as I have. And this is a gathering of that particular lodge on the occasion that I was installed in the chair of that one. Now, if you choose to do so, you can also join other branches of Freemasonry. These were briefly referred to in the introduction as other orders. They're extensions of Freemasonry, if you like, based upon the core of what I've been describing, which we call craft Freemasonry. So as a member of a lodge, you'll be asked to attend and participate in and contribute to its meetings. There'll be opportunities to develop your understanding of what the dramas mean and things for you to learn. So we tend to interpret and understand and develop really through reflection and discussion with others. So there's lots of opportunities for that. And we'd also give you the chance to contribute to other people's ceremonies as you progress. Most lodges offer a structured approach to this learning with individual assistance given through a personal mentor. I've mentioned offices in the lodge. To explain, members of the lodge take on different roles or offices, and these tend to change each year. So each officer fulfills a particular role in one or other aspect of the lodge's life. Some officers are concerned with enacting the dramas or ceremonies, others with the management or administration of the lodge, and others with providing care and support to its members and their families. Officers are identified by light blue collars that they wear and the badge or jewel that's suspended from them. And each officer is also located or sat in his own place in the lodge room during our meetings. Now, to become the presiding officer or master of your lodge, you have to have previously occupied a number of the other offices concerned with the dramas or ceremonies. So these involve a commitment to learning and then delivering at a lodge meeting the words of the drama, which we call the ritual. Every year, a different member of the lodge is elected and subsequently installed as the master, and then he appoints and invests his officers. So a new member progresses through a series of officers occupying each for a year in order to become the master. And by the time he's installed as the master, he should have a good knowledge and rounded experience of Freemasonry and be in a good position to give some leadership to his members. Now, lodges in turn are part of a wider organisation of Freemasonry. I've already referenced in passing something called a Grand Lodge. These are national, or in some cases overseas, state bodies which authorise and regulate Freemasonry in their territory. And every year, each Grand Lodge elects its own Grand Master, who presides over its meetings and provides it with leadership. The Grand Master is supported by his own Grand Officers, who are appointed annually in roles that are largely equivalent to those within a lodge. They just have a longer name and fancier regalia, which I shall come on to. Now, since 1967, the Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England has been His Royal Highness, the Duke of Kent, who's a cousin to the Queen. And he continues a very long line of members of the British royal family who have been Freemasons. One of his roles is to issue warrants to new lodges to authorise them to meet and to make Masons. And lodges are then required to conduct their business in conformity with the rules of that Grand Lodge. Now, many Grand Lodges have introduced intermediate or regional bodies between them and their lodges. So in United Grand Lodge, we have provinces, and these approximate to our county boundaries. And we also have some overseas districts, which supervise lodges that were formed in our former territories or parts of the Commonwealth. And each province is ruled by their own provincial Grand Master, and he's appointed by the Grand Master for a period of up to 10 years and is supported by, you've guessed it, his own officers, who he again appoints annually. And this same pattern is repeated in our overseas districts. Every Grand Lodge, that's the sort of national body, is an independent and sovereign organisation. There's no international or global umbrella body. Relations between Grand Lodges are governed by an international agreement based upon compliance with our key principles, or what we call our landmarks. Grand Lodges who recognise each other allow their members to visit each other's subsidiary lodges. So, for example, Fred Aldred, who's incidentally just left, is from Ontario, and he's a member of a Grand Lodge there, and I'm able to visit him and he's able to visit me because our Grand Lodges are recognised or recognise each other. So I've given you an overview of Freemasonry, its purpose and principles, and I've outlined how it's organised. So I'd now like to just turn to some of the more visual aspects you will see if you were to visit a Masonic meeting place. And the first thing you'll probably, well, I suppose what I ought to do is explain that a Masonic meeting room is a closed room. Outside the door of the room while we're meeting is one officer we call the tiler, whose role is to ensure that only Freemasons enter. And inside the door is an officer called the inner guard. And he tests the qualifications of anyone who the tiler allows to pass. So we have a double lock system which is in place to ensure that our meetings remain private. The lodge effectively is a sealed environment. No phones are used inside, there's no network connection or anything. The room itself is sometimes referred to as a temple, but that's only part of the symbolism. The lodge room and its symbolism represents King Solomon's temple, which, as I said, was the first major stone structure to be defined in any detail. The thing that you will notice mostly when you first enter a room is what we call the squared pavement. It's not the base for a gigantic game of chess, but it's rather one of our many, many symbols, and it represents the progress that a Freemason makes from darkness, you can think of that as ignorance or prejudice, to light. You can think of that as education and enlightenment. At each corner of the flooring, or sometimes on the walls, you're likely to see a tassel, and these represent the four cardinal virtues: temperance, prudence, fortitude, and justice. And just as the flooring represents the floor plan and boundary of King Solomon's temple, so do the four cardinal virtues at its corners provide the boundary within which we are encouraged to live our lives. So our dramas and ceremonies take place on this flooring, and the candidate for each ceremony moves between different parts of the room, which brings me to the next thing you're likely to notice, which are three normally quite large pedestals. Now, these pedestals are the seating places of the three principal officers. They're at the farthest, they're the end furthest from the door is for the presiding officer or master of the lodge. He's considered to be sat in the east. Directly opposite him in the west is sat the senior warden, and halfway down the lodge in the south is sat the junior warden. So their respective positions, I'm giving a little bit of symbolism here, just as a taster. Their respective positions mark the passage of the sun, which rises in the east, and that's the master's position, bringing light a new day and a fresh start, and it sets in the west via the south. At each pedestal is a column supporting a candle, and the columns represent 3 of the 5 noble orders of architecture, namely Ionic, Doric, and Corinthian. You don't have to remember that lot, by the way, but they in turn have the symbolic meanings of wisdom, which is the attribute of the master. He brings wisdom to the lodge. Strength, the attribute of the senior warden, and beauty, the attribute of the junior warden, which gives a lot of us good cause to have a laugh at the junior warden's expense every year. They also represent the roles and contributions of the 3 Grand Masters who together were responsible for the building of King Solomon's Temple. At all meetings of the lodge, on the master's pedestal will be found at least one book, which Freemasons refer to as the volume of the sacred law. Now, if you remember, Freemasonry is not a religion and it has no religious doctrine. However, it does require its members to believe in a supreme being. And therefore, we ask all candidates to take an oath, or what we call an obligation, on the holy book of their particular faith. And we use the generic and neutral name of the volume of the sacred law rather than use the name of the holy book of any particular religion. Now, in this picture here, you'll see that there are 3 different volumes of the sacred law, and that represents the fact that within that lodge will be people from 3 different faiths. If I turn our attention to the people in the room themselves rather than the objects, when Freemasons attend lodge meetings, they wear distinctive regalia over their normal, very smart clothing. The regalia consists of 3 components. There's an apron, a collar, and a breast jewel. I'll explain those. Each member wears an apron, and in England and Wales, these are worn outside of the suit jacket. Every apron has a white central skin, which echoes the working aprons of the operative masons who built the cathedrals. The badges and emblems on the apron, which you might be able to see in the picture there, represent different ranks and offices that the individual has achieved. Light blue aprons are worn by master masons and by the master and past masters of lodges. Dark blue aprons are worn by those, normally past masters, who've been recognised or honoured by their provincial district or Grand Master for their service to Freemasonry, and so they've become provincial, district or Grand officers. Now, some members, as you'll see, wear large collars around their neck or on their shoulders. If the collar is light blue, it indicates that the member is an officer or past master of the lodge. Dark blue collars are worn by provincial, district or Grand officers. Now, if you look closely, you'll see, particularly on the chap on the right, what looks like a medal. It's not, it's what we call a breast jewel, and they're worn on the left breast and indicate other Masonic achievements, such as being a founder or past master of a lodge. Now, all members are expected to dress smartly in a dark suit, black shoes, a white collared shirt, and either a black tie or an approved tie that represents their lodge, province, or Grand Lodge. Now, the self-discipline required for a uniformly smart dress helps us to concentrate the mind on the meeting and its proceedings. It minimises displays of a person's material wealth or his status outside of Freemasonry. I've left to very last an issue that may well be on many people's lips, and that is the role of secrecy. We often hear the term secret in connection with Freemasonry. Now, as Freemasons, we meet in private, not in secret. Our existence is well known, our meeting places are open, our members are encouraged to acknowledge and talk about their membership, providing they do not use their membership to seek personal material gain or benefit. However, we do restrict our meetings to those who are already Freemasons and to those who have been admitted as members. And that's because our various degree ceremonies make a deep and lasting impact on those who experience them for the first time. They're examples of experiential learning, and their significance would be lost if they were turned into public theatre to be witnessed by those who've not shared those experiences themselves. So to enable us to restrict our meetings to members only, we adopt the same techniques as those used by the medieval stonemasons. They wished to ensure that only qualified craftsmen were employed on building projects. However, as those craftsmen tended to be illiterate, there was no point in issuing them with written certificates. Instead, they used a system of trade secrets. Now, we call those in our jargon modes of recognition, and they comprise a series of particular signs or movements of the hand, or handshakes or tokens as we call them, and words for each degree. Each degree therefore has its own distinctive modes of recognition within our ceremonies, and we use them within the ceremonies only to distinguish Freemasons of one degree from those of another, and to test a candidate's qualifications to progress to the next degree. To prevent unqualified people from being admitted to a lodge meeting or to a ceremony in a higher degree, every Freemason is entrusted with those modes of recognition as a part of each ceremony. When he takes the obligation of that degree, he promises not to reveal those modes of recognition to those not qualified. So I've told you something about Freemasonry, what it is and what it isn't. I've explained how we're organised, and I've given an insight into some of the visual aspects of Freemasonry. I may have gone into too much detail in one or two areas. I'll be interested in your feedback and your thoughts. For good measure, I've also revealed the role of secrecy in Freemasonry, and I've done that without revealing any secrets. So I'm now very keen to answer your questions, and will happily address any issue that you wish to raise, and that of course is except one. Despite the title of this talk, please don't ask me to reveal the modes of recognition that we use to recognise other Freemasons, or to describe in too much detail our ceremonies. Quite happy to give you an overview of the ceremonies, the pattern of them, but I won't go into such detail that it would spoil the experience for those who subsequently join and become Freemasons themselves. For everything else, I'm all yours, and it's back to you, Nigel.